Picking up at the very end of Jonah 1, reading through, same question as always. What's weird? What's strange about what's happening? So we'll start you off easy and then go from there. So chapter 1, verse 17. And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. At the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. So, yeah. Just a standard Tuesday. So what stands out is weird, confusing, problematic, weirdly specific, weirdly vague, any of that stuff.
The Lord is talking to fish now.
Yep. That's weird. Especially because he doesn't do that in the beginning, right? In 1:17, he appoints a fish. And then in the end of 2, we would kind of expect from like a parallel sense that he would just command the fish or appoint the fish to do this or whatever, but he speaks to it, which is interesting. So yeah, that's weird.
Another weird thing is Jonah actually speaks. Right.
Yeah. This is the most we hear Jonah speak, really, in the entire story. So he not only speaks, but yeah, he prays, something he has been completely reluctant to do up until this point. So yeah, like he was pretty sure he was going to die, and at no point there did he pray. And now he's in a fish where he would probably assume he's going to die. So then why pray now? That seems like interesting timing.
I think it's funny that he was actively running from the Lord, and then he finally goes, I'm banished. How will I look upon your holy temple? It's like,
Yeah.
Finally crosses your mind.
Yeah. Oh no, the temple. Yeah, all of a sudden he's very concerned about being in God's presence, never seeing the temple again. What did he say? Yeah, I'm driven away from your sight. Not really. Yeah, well, so Jonah's conception of this is, 2:1, the narrator tells us it's from the belly of the fish. And then in Jonah 2, he says he's in the belly of Sheol, which if you're unfamiliar, Sheol, well, we talked about this some last week. Sheol is essentially like the land of the dead. It's not really what we would think of as like Dante's Inferno or anything. It's more like the Greek Hades, just a bunch of dead people. Very few details about Sheol, except we're told that you can't praise the Lord from there. You can't give God praise there. So presumably you're just toast. So he says he's in the belly of Sheol, which is an interesting kind of poetic thing going on there. But also maybe more literal than we think it is. I don't know. Let's see. What else?
It's a prayer of thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's not what we would expect, which we'll dig into here. He's not really calling out for help. which is interesting. He kind of talks about how he did do that, something we have not seen in the story. And then it's him, it's him. It's a very Davidic kind of formula here of his prayer coming up to God. It doesn't necessarily, let me double check. Yeah, he answered me. We don't get a whole lot of details about like what God does here. But Jonah seems to be, he's like, I'm going to do sacrifices, which might be tricky. What I have vowed I will pay. But yeah, it's not, it's we would expect something like, I'm down here in the pit and I'm struggling and this is really hard. And we don't hear any of that. We just hear kind of like he's talking about all of this as if it's already happened, which is strange. What else?
You just experienced, you could almost call it grace from pagans.
Mm.
And then he, in his prayer, like, what is the word? Like,
Verse 8?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He talks about how all the pagans are bad.
Yeah.
So you just had a really good experience. They're trying to save you.
Yeah. Weird time to be dunking on pagans in your prayer there. That's also, we'll talk about this more. That's a very there's a lot of debate about what he's talking about there. The Hebrew is not that ambiguous, but what exactly he means or what he's referencing is kind of tricky. But it does seem like, at least how ESV renders it, that he's talking about people who like idols are dumb and forsake their hope of steadfast love. So yeah, it feels like we're still being in a fish has not made Jonah much more self-aware, it would seem. Anything else?
He's a little concerned because there's weeds wrapped around his head.
Yeah. I feel like we're really kind of glossing something here. He's in a fish. He's in a fish. That's not normal. So that's strange. And yeah, we have all of these kind of images of weeds wrapped around his head and water's closing in over him. There's a lot of like drowning, being engulfed kind of discussion, which kind of raises a question like, is he talking about when he got thrown into the water? Is he talking about being in the fish? Is he talking about something that's going to happen in the future? Like, it's very unclear. One rabbi actually, or maybe a couple, there is a long-standing Jewish tradition that Jonah is the boy that Elijah resurrects, and that he's actually referencing that prior period and putting it here. I've not been able to find what they're pulling from the text to get there, but I think they're pointing out the fact that he seems to be talking about something that's already happened. So that's weird. But this whole prayer is kind of bizarre in that way, and it's made especially bizarre when you consider where it's happening from. Also, when does Jonah pray? After 3 days, it seems like, anyway. So, like, huh? Why did it take him so long to pray? Is it like, okay, I keep not dying, so maybe now I should pray. I don't know.
It took him that long to get the seaweed from around his neck.
Could be. Yeah, not a lot of room in there. Anything else?
What did you do for the first 3 days?
Yeah. Again, we have this weird silence again, which seems to characterize Jonah. Someone came up to me after class at one point and kind of talked to me about, like, Jonah seems kind of depressed, which I think we often read Jonah as just like, this is a very Reformed thing to do. He's just like, he's so rebellious and he's so depraved. I think there's some depression going on here, because after all, how we interpret, like, we asked, I think twice now, like, why is Jonah so sure that like throwing him in the ocean is going to help? And a lot of people look at this text and what they say is, well, what Jonah is doing is he's continuing to run, essentially. So he's been running from God, and every time he's run from God, he's gone down to Joppa, down into the hold of the ship. And now he's like, I'm going to go to the one place that God can't find me. I'm just going to die. I don't want to live here anymore. I'm just going to go where I can be free of God forever, which is not like a mentally healthy, emotionally healthy place to be. So, I mean, yeah, like he's just hanging out in the fish, apparently, for 3 days and 3 nights without saying anything. And the rabbis have a theory about what prompts him to actually start talking, but we'll get to that. But yeah, it's again, we have this weird Jonah who he's still being just so cagey about what is going on. We don't really have any insight into why he's doing what he's doing, or what his motives are for anything. So because I think in my head I'm always like, oh, he goes down to the fish and then he prays and then he has to wait 3 days and then he gets barfed onto the shore. But it seems like the opposite is actually true. Anything else?
Does any of this have to do with 2 Kings, what he did then, and what he saw happening to Israel? And now he's sad.
Could be. So a big question here is, does this come before or after when he prophesies on behalf of Jeroboam and Israel is basically able to restore its original borders for a brief period of time? Because we talked about way at the beginning of this class that Jonah's big claim to fame, apart from this, is him basically prophesying this very hopeful message that Israel will restore the borders it was originally promised, which then Amos, another prophet, is going to completely undo later. So there's a question like, does the fish thing happen first and then the 2 Kings thing? Does the 2 Kings thing happen first? Because if you were given a prophecy by God that was like, yay, Israel, we're going to be restored, and then that all gets taken away. Some rabbis talk about maybe Jonah's worried about seeming like a false prophet. Some are saying that he just like kind of doesn't trust God anymore, possibly. But yeah, where this falls in line with Jonah in Kings is a big question, I think. That we'll never, maybe, I suppose, in the new heavens and the new earth, but at least for now, we won't know the answer to. Anything else?
Not trying to derail it, but if you actually look into stories of people who were swallowed by whales, it has happened. I mean, even recently, it's happened.
Yeah.
But whales cannot actually swallow people,
Right.
because their throats are too small. It doesn't work.
Oh.
And so, if a whale tried to swallow a person, and the person gets stuck in their mouth, they just spit it right back out because it's like, I can't handle you. You're not going down. You're going back out.
Yeah. I think that would be my reaction.
It's kind of bizarre because here, Jonah, he's in this well for 3 days.
Yeah.
Before he spit, and I don't know if whales can actually regurgitate or not. I haven't looked that far into it, but it's like, so I have to wonder, where exactly was Jonah? Did he actually make it all the way down to the belly, or is he just like stuck in the mouth? He's like stuck between the whale's teeth, and the whale is just like trying to work this thing out of his teeth.
Yeah. Well, so let's.
When does great fish become a whale?
The popular culture, I think, in general, we go, a big fish, they must have meant a whale. We're smart. So we're going to talk about that. Because spoiler, we're probably going to spend most of our time on verse 117 today. Because the most famous part of this story is the fish, which is unfortunate. But there's actually a lot to talk about with that fish. So the first thing is this creature that we see here. In ESV, it's called a great fish. So Gadol, again, great city, great storm. Now we have a great fish. Everything in Jonah is huge. And the thing we have here is what's called a dag. And this word, as far as we know, just means fish. So we have a Gadol dog. So just like we have a big storm that none of these sailors have ever seen before, and later we're going to be told that Nineveh is like a 3-day walk, even though it absolutely wasn't. A city so huge you can't even fathom it. We have a massive, huge fish. And that's interesting for a few reasons, because I think we see this and we go, that's weird. Fish are usually not that big. There are some like prehistoric fish, I know because of my 3-year-old, that were that big. You could be swallowed by a mosasaur, I suppose. But as far as we're aware, there don't seem to be any fish that size. That's kind of our reaction. This is often one of the things that, like, if you talk to people who are like big into disproving the Bible, because that's a cool thing to be into, they'll talk about things like this. Like, well, okay, there was a huge fish and Jonah got swallowed and wasn't unconscious the whole time. Because if you look at stories of people in situations like this, they don't do well, even if they survive. So we look at this and we're like, oh, that's weird. Like, because we're like, I don't know that any great fish exist. But if you were a person in the ancient world, the thing that strikes you about this, it is weird that it is a fish, but not because you think it's a whale. It's because you think it should be a dragon, right? So we know, we talked about this last week, that in the creation story, we don't really have an account of, like, except for maybe verse 1, of God like creating something out of nothing. What we have is a world that is full of darkness and chaotic waters, right? So darkness, you can't see, you can't really make anything out. And water, it's this place that humans can't live, right? This is a totally anti-human environment. And in the ancient world, it was maybe because of dinosaur bones, we don't know what prompted this. But in the ancient world, it was believed that here there be dragons. There are evil sea monsters that roam around and destroy ships and eat people. And in the Hebrew world, these were called tanin. I feel like I should draw a picture of a dragon. Oh no. This is a dragon. I spent all night. Yeah. Well, it's functionally the same result. Yeah. So what you would expect is this evil, chaotic, predator that is able to, we modern equivalent to, I think, of like the Kraken, right? So something that's complete destruction, huge, vicious. And what's funny, because again, in our Western minds, we go, that's so silly. But these things, we do actually talk about these tanin, these sea dragons, these sea monsters in Scripture. Anybody know the first time we hear about a sea dragon in Scripture? Leviathan. Job? Before Job. Before Noah.
Genesis?
Yeah. So Genesis, if you want, you can flip here. Genesis 1. We have sea dragons before we have people. Genesis 1:21, and this is one of those things where I'm like, guys, we could have had such a cool Bible translation, and y'all chickened out. On the 5th day, so right before we show it, verse 20. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the ESV decided to be real vanilla about it and say there were great sea creatures, because then you and I can imagine like a whale or a walrus or something. But that's not what the author is saying. That word great sea creature is tanin. absolutely what it is saying here is that it is sea monsters. On the fifth day, God creates huge sea monsters in the deep. And it's very explicit. It does not need to be here. We're already told there's things in the water. But verse 21 goes out of its way to say, God made this terrifying dragon on the fifth day. So that's kind of strange. Why do we think the author of Genesis would pull out this detail? Who cares? I mean, it's cool. It's metal as heck. But like, why talk about God creating sea dragons?
Well, because the Bible, if you see it one place, you typically see something another place. So it reaffirms that is actually what it meant. So we're seeing this, now we're seeing it in Jonah, and we also see the Leviathan from Job, which confirmed that, yeah, this was what was meant.
Right. I think you're right there. I think the question is like, why here? Why not somewhere else? Why is it important that God creates a sea dragon?
Because in other creation myths, the sea dragons are what the gods are resolving in creating.
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to what we talked about with the sailors, right? In the ancient mind, there are gods that have these domains that they control, and those gods might conflict with each other. But you don't have like an overarching single deity over all of it. And Jonah's big revelation is that God is over all of it. And we see a similar thing here. If you read through Genesis 1, for all of the concerns that we bring to Genesis 1 that I don't think the author is really concerned about, I don't think the author is like super concerned about literal days, but that's neither here nor there. What they definitely are concerned about is if you read through Genesis 1, they are making fun of or inverting other creation myths. And one example of that is the fact that often in the ancient world, there are kind of the gods who represent some semblance of order, but they're always chaos deities. In the Egyptian world, there's this idea that, I'm going to get my Egyptian theology wrong. I think the sun god, which I think is Ra in this iteration, has to, when the sun sets, he goes down into the chaos realm. And there's an evil serpent there that tries to swallow him every time. And so every time the sun rises, it's a sign that Ra has survived that journey. So that's a very big deal. But in the Genesis myth, we have what in the ancient world are the most terrifying creatures in existence. Because also in a lot of the ancient world, the single most terrifying thing that could happen to you are floods. The Tigris and Euphrates, very famously, I think it's particularly the Euphrates, would just flood very suddenly and wipe out like entire villages and stuff. So you're taking the most terrifying creature in the ancient world and you're being like, oh yeah, God made that. Like he's aware of it, he created it. This is not like some force that is able to keep him from doing what he wants. It's just part of his thing. We see this in Psalm 104. Where it talks about the Leviathan, which is a particular iteration of the Tannin, the sea dragon, that Psalm 104 says, let me pull that up here, because it's actually kind of cute. Psalm 104, verse 24. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In your wisdom have you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. So like we see similar things in Job, talking about can you hook Leviathan, things like this, where it seems like God's perspective of Leviathan is he's like, this is just one of my creatures. This is not a big deal to me. We do have other places like Psalm 74 where we talk about God crushing the Tannin, because Tannin is also a word that's used to describe serpents as a particular kind of dragon. So we have a lot of discussion of crushing dragons in the Bible. And it's actually something that Jesus is going to bring up, because the whole reason I'm bringing this up is this is what we would expect to show up in this story. Because like great fish were not like a normal thing in the ancient Hebrew world. People weren't like, you know how there's big fish everywhere? Not a thing. So if something is going to swallow Jonah during a sea storm, it's going to be a tannin. there are myths about these kinds of things. But the author specifically tells us it's a fish. Although someone disagrees with this author on that characterization, or I don't think really disagrees, but is doing something else. Matthew 19. We've talked about this a little bit. Oh wait, is it Matthew 19? Sorry, Matthew 12. Verse 38. Jesus is going back and forth with the scribes and Pharisees. He's called out the Pharisees pretty heavily about the kind of fruit they are producing, which is interesting in the context of Jonah. These are religious-sounding guys who are not producing good fruit. Verse 38, then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Once again, ESV, love you ESV, doesn't go for the jugular here, because that word for great fish is not fish, it's dragon. Ketos is the Greek term. Jesus calls this a dragon. Takes the word that if you're looking at the Septuagint, anytime you've got this word tannin, you're going to get the word ketos. So that's interesting. Jesus is saying a sign is going to be given to the nation, similar to what we got with Jonah, where he was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, except whereas the story tells us this is just a fish bopping along. Jesus calls it the chaos dragon. So that's interesting. What does that mean? I don't know. We'll get back to it. But let's talk about this fish because...
Wait a minute. Chaos dragon is tannin?
Yes. So yeah, the word tannin means sea monster or dragon, because there are land tannin as well.
Which is the same word that's used in Genesis 1.
Yes. And then Jesus uses the Greek equivalent of that when he talks about this fish.
Fill out the Greek.
Yeah. So we got ketos is the term he uses there. Yeah, epsilon. So that's interesting. So we have this interesting inversion happening in Jonah where we're expecting some terrible dragon to come and like chomp Jonah, and that's the end of the story, right? Jonah, 1 book long, shortest book of the Bible, done. But we don't get that. Instead, we get kind of a parody of it. Instead of a huge dragon, God sends a huge fish. Maybe for a couple reasons. One, we're emphasizing God's sovereignty, right? Because we're in the chaos waters, and yet God is able to appoint a fish to just go swallow Jonah. But also, God has tools besides just horrific destruction to bring upon Jonah. Because basically, Jonah's going to be in a little submarine for the next few days. Or however long he's in the fish, we don't know exactly.
So that goes back to the reason why God created in the beginning, because he had a plan for that.
Ooh, yeah. The rabbis, I think it's Rabbi Meir, says that God created the great fish in the 6 days of creation, which is interesting. This fish has been appointed from time immemorial for this specific purpose, which I think they're doing a lot of ninja Bible stuff with the tannin in Genesis 1 there. But yeah, this is, we still would read this at the end of chapter 1 as, oh no, this is very bad. He's going to be digested inside a fish. But something interesting happens which doesn't happen very much in Scripture. And it's pretty much impossible for us to catch unless you're well acquainted with Hebrew. Jonah 1:17, we're told that a great fish swallows Jonah, and he is in the belly of that fish for 3 days and 3 nights. That word is dag. Then, Jonah 2:1, Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish. That word, sorry, sea dragon, is daga. Now, why? Any linguistic people here? Why would you suddenly add an A to the end of a word? Because it's a lady. The fish changes gender in the middle of this. And I know this is sensitive for us in our cultural moment, but the fish changes gender in the middle of this story. When it swallows him, it is a male fish. When he is praying from it, it is a female fish. And when it vomits him out, let me double check that. It goes back to being a male fish. So, yeah, so probably not trying to make a progressive gender identity point here. Why? Well, because this is like a dumb mistake that happened, which is what in times past us Christian scholars have generally done. Jewish rabbis, no way. They were like, something's happening here.
Well, maybe it's because it changed to the female because it's nurturing Jonah,
So
keeping Jonah alive.
yeah, so that's I think you can go either way on this. Whatever is kind of I think we're given the freedom to do this. But yeah, I mean, so where is Jonah? He's in the belly of the dog, right? And when that's a male fish, you done been eaten, right? That's what's happening. But if it's the belly of the daga, what does that bring to mind? Yeah. There's a birth image happening here. Jonah is we're getting some kind of image that when Jonah prays in the fish, there is some kind of birth, gestation, pregnancy image going on here. Now, the rabbis have just one of my favorite midrash about this, because for them, they're like, there has to be a reason in the story why this happens. And so it actually has to do with this, the 3 days. So what the rabbis say, and again, this is not them being like, this is what definitely happened. They're like, this is one possible explanation, and it maybe serves to underline the purposes of the story. So Jonah gets swallowed by a male fish. And you would think at that point, Jonah would be like, okay, time for me to pray. But then 3 days go by. And what the rabbis say, I think this is Eliezer again, is that Jonah has too much room in the male fish. He's got just enough space to kind of wiggle around. And during that time, he's unwilling to pray. So what God does is he commands the male fish to spit Jonah into the mouth of a pregnant female fish, so that when he is inside the fish, he is packed in with the other embryos, and he has no room left. He is completely... Rabbis are much more comfortable with weird stuff than we are. But yeah, this idea, why does Jonah start praying? Is because he's finally reached the point where he has no wiggle room. He has nowhere else to go, essentially. God has to basically pin him down in a chokehold with fish eggs. And that's when he starts to pray. I don't know. I think that's fun. But this happens. We go from an image of being consumed to an image of birth. And Jonah is going to be born in in a pretty grisly way.
But we know
Well-
that there are amphibians that go either way, that switch from masculine to feminine.
That's true.
So
But
why
the,
couldn't a-
I mean, maybe. I don't know why an ancient Jewish person would know that. Or like how, I don't know how an ancient Jewish person would know that, or how Jonah would know that in the belly of the fish. If it like, I don't know what that would look like. Like suddenly the stomach, the inside of the stomach was blue and then it turns pink. I don't know. It seems like more probably the author is giving us an image of this really, let's talk a little bit, because Jonah gets swallowed. Which, like, you know, if you're being swallowed, you're probably not in a good situation. But Jonah's not the only person in Scripture who gets swallowed. Can we think of anybody else?
Who was swallowed up by that ground during the Exodus?
Yeah, anybody remember who that is?
Korah.
Korah, yeah. So Korah, same word, gets swallowed by the earth. There's another one, although it's kind of tucked away in a poem, and we don't typically think of it this way. But in Exodus, we're told that the sea falls in on the Egyptians, and then we're given an extra detail, which is that the army was swallowed by the earth. So Pharaoh and his army also swallowed by the earth, which like
They were swallowed by the Red Sea.
well, but then Miriam says that they're swallowed by the earth after that. So apparently they get swallowed by the sea, and then God opens up the earth beneath the sea, or this is poetic, whatever, and then they go down into Sheol, proper Sheol. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. This is another interesting Jewish Midrash thing, because in general, like, how are these people doing after they get swallowed? Yeah, they're toast, right? Or are they? So let's hop over to Numbers really quick, because there's something really interesting in Numbers 26. Because yeah, we would think you get swallowed by the earth, you are done for. But Numbers 26, verse 9, we're enumerating the tribes of Israel because we're in Numbers, everyone's favorite book. And we get to the sons of Eliab, who are Nemuel, Dathan, and Abiram. These are the Dathan and Abiram chosen from the congregation who contended against Moses and Aaron in the company of Korah when they contended against the Lord. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up together with Korah when that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men and they became a warning. But the sons of Korah did not die. So, two ways to read that. One way is that the sons of Korah didn't go along with their dad, which I think is typically how we read it and may very well be the correct way to read it. It's certainly the more straightforward reading of the text. Or perhaps that God had mercy on the sons of Korah in spite of their rebellion. But what's interesting is that in Jewish thought, there is an idea that when it says the sons of Korah did not die, what it means is they were swallowed by the earth, but they didn't die. This is from the Talmud. The idea is that they had a last moment like thought of repentance. And so when they were swallowed by the earth, God created a place in Gehenna for them to be able, which is where they sing and recite psalms and bring them up to us somehow. And in deeper Jewish legend, the sons of Korah wind up being swallowed right under where the temple goes. And there is, oh man, I wish we had time to get into this, but we don't. There's an incredible midrash, which is absolutely worth reading. There's a very good article. I think I stole the name of this class from it. I think it's called Jonah's Magical Mystery Tour of the Deep or something like that. There's an insane midrash about Jonah when he gets swallowed by this fish that sounds insane to us because it's very fantastical, but there are a lot of interesting details in there. One of them being that, so Jonah gets swallowed by this fish, and the fish takes him on this tour of the deep, which is what Jonah is describing in Jonah 2. So like when he talks about, I was in the heart of the seas, the floods surrounded me, I saw the roots of the mountains. Part of the question is like, well, how did you see any of that stuff? And the midrash that Eliezer gives us is that when Jonah is swallowed by the fish, he is surprised because the inside of the fish is like a synagogue. There is a pearl that hangs from the fish that illumines it with divine light, and Jonah can see out of the eyes of the fish. So the fish was able to take him around the deep and he can see everything. Which we're like, that probably didn't happen. And I think also Eliezer is like, that probably didn't happen. But I think what he's telling us is what we expect to be this kind of sentence of death for Jonah, even in the depths of like chaos and darkness and destruction and judgment, even in that, God is able to make a synagogue for himself, is able to bring light and enlightenment there. And there's a very interesting part of this midrash, which I think Eliezer's riffing off here, where he takes him to the depths of Sheol and to the pillars of the earth, and Jonah winds up right under the temple, which he talks about in this prayer. And the sons of Korah are there chanting. And perhaps, I think what Eliezer is trying to get us to see here is we're highlighting God's ability to both turn horrible situations into situations of rebirth or mercy or enlightenment, but also just the depths of God's mercy, that even someone who is in the midst of being swallowed by the earth, if they call out to God in repentance, that God will make a place for them. And that even in the depths of the sea with Jonah doing all of his stuff and trying to run away from God, God has given him a safe haven, a little ark of his own to swim around in. So yeah, you can do with that what you want. It's a very good article. You should read it. There's also an interesting part where Jonah is able to scare away Leviathan in the weirdest way possible. And I'm not going to tell you how he does it because it would not be appropriate for this class. But it's very funny and very good. So check that out sometime. I'll send a link to it in the email. But what we're seeing broadly is what we would expect to be. We're expecting this to be a chaos dragon. It's a fish. We're expecting swallowing meaning being destroyed, being consumed. And instead, there's a sense of like he's being tucked away in a safe place. The fish changes up on us, and what we expect to be a symbol of death is now a symbol of birth. Jonah is literally, in the mind of the ancient world, remember, we talked about this. Like in the mind of the ancient world, there is the land, there are the pillars that the land stands on, and then under the land, there's the land of the dead, Sheol. So as he's in this fish, when he says, I'm in the depths of Sheol, I'm in the belly of Sheol, in the ancient mind, he literally is. He's literally going to like where the dead are, but he's still alive. And actually, by passing through death, by entering the belly of Sheol and then coming out again, he's going to bring life to the entirety of Nineveh, mostly against his will. But that will happen, which, when we're talking about this sign of Jonah, this one person who's going to allow themselves to be swallowed by death, and yet through that death, there's going to be a rebirth that brings life to all the nations, not just the Jews. Jesus is calling this to mind because this image is absolutely what he's about to do. He's about to go to the depths of Sheol, and we think he's just going to be toast. He's going to be done forever. But what he's actually going to do is be reborn. And in being reborn, so will the rest of us. But why would he call it a tanin, though?
Because God said it was very good.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, he's changing up the story here, right? Because what does a tanin represent? It represents chaos. It represents death. It represents, it's the decreation, the complete anti-God creature. And Jesus says, I'm going to like Jonah got swallowed by a fish. I'm going to be swallowed by death. I'm going to be swallowed by chaos and evil. And even in the midst of this, I'm going to be in the belly of that for 3 days, and then I'm going to come back. And if you know the story of Jonah, what happens when Jonah comes back? Jesus tells the Pharisees that the generations of Nineveh will rise up and they will judge you because they heard what Jonah had to say and they repented. When I rise up from entering the belly of Sheol, the belly of the Tanin, will you repent or not? Cool stuff. I'm sure it was very confusing to people at the time. But Jesus is pulling on this image here. And I think there's maybe a broader thing here that there is something about. I think Jesus speaks to this. He says, a seed has to die before it can grow. There is something about the way of Jesus that is for all of us, that what looks like death to us is maybe actually a form of life, that dying to ourselves in some way, giving up the old man and all those things, which seems like just a complete destruction of ourselves. In that, actually, when we let go of our ego, when we let go of all these things, there's some kind of meaningful new life that shows up there.
It's all throughout the entirety of when he's asking to Nicodemus to be born again.
Yeah,
To be reborn is the common theme.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this idea of rebirth, but that it is interesting because something that Nicodemus is like, how do you crawl back into your mother's womb? Which we're like, Nicodemus, you dummy. I think he's actually doing some rabbinical judo there. But it does beg the question, in order to be born again, like what has to happen to you, right? And one answer is potentially like you have to die or something that looks like death in order to be reborn.
Ben, how long was this on Jonah before when Jesus was talking about? Like how many years? You know?
I mean, that's a good question. We don't super know. We know this is post-exile. So like this is a story that everyone is well aware of, because I think too, that actually raises a very good point. Let's go to a really interesting passage in Jeremiah, which I think will shed some light on this. Because my kind of thesis of this is if you read Jonah's prayer from Jonah's perspective, we're going to see this. Jonah is going to be referencing Psalms left and right. But what's really interesting is every Psalm that Jonah references, he's going to kind of misappropriate. He's going to show a profound lack of self-awareness about himself in every Psalm that he brings up. But there's another way to look at Jonah's prayer that I think would have, and I think one of the reasons why this is such an important text to the Jewish people. Orthodox Jews read the book of Jonah on Yom Kippur every year. This is like New Year, let's read Jonah. What? Not what we would probably go to. But I think this sheds a little light on why. So in Jeremiah 51, we actually have a pretty stunning image that actually calls us back to the Jonah story. And I'm going to tee us up with a little bit of context here. Jeremiah is talking about judgment on Babylon, that it is going to come. So let's start in verse 16, just to get a little context of Jeremiah 51. So when he, that is God, utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens, and he makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain, and he brings forth the wind from his storehouses. That sounds a lot like Jonah 1 so far, right? Huge storm being summoned by God. Every man is stupid and without knowledge. Every goldsmith is put to shame by his idols, for his images are false, and there is no breath in them. They are worthless, a work of delusion. At the time of their punishment, they shall perish. Just went through a whole section of people calling out to gods that aren't gods, right? We just had a whole repudiation of idols in Jonah 1. And then let's skip down to verse 34. This is the inhabitant of Zion is speaking here. So just a normal Jewish person. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has devoured me. He has crushed me. He has made me an empty vessel. He has swallowed me like a tanin. He has filled his stomach with my delicacies. He has rinsed me out. The violence done to me and to my kinsmen be upon Babylon. Let the inhabitant of Zion say. So in Jeremiah, we have some similar images coming up. We have being swallowed. We have being in the belly of a beast. But the beast that Jeremiah is talking about is the Babylonian Empire. So I think something I want us to keep in mind as we move forward, and what I'll wrap with here, is that in Jonah's specific context, his prayer makes no sense, actually, and is kind of continues to affirm that Jonah really doesn't seem like he's learned a lot at this point. But what we're going to see is that in the context of Israel in exile, this prayer is actually very meaningful, because the fish that the belly that Israel was in exile was Babylon. And through Babylon just seemed like a place where the Jewish people were going to go to die. Kingdom's over, Davidic line is ended, whatever. And actually what happens in Babylon is when we start getting the first synagogues, is when we see a huge revival in studying Torah. It's why when Jesus comes back, there is so much knowledge of Torah when he shows up. It's why there are Pharisees and Sadducees and all these things. If you read through how the Jewish people talk about the exile, they talk about it as very similar to this fish. It was a place that was supposed to swallow us. It was death, but we came out reborn. We came out with a new appreciation for Torah. We came out with new ways of studying this and making sure our children know what Torah says, and making sure that we don't lose our faith, but we can preserve it for the next generation. So I think as we read through this prayer, we're going to see kind of two side-by-side applications. There's Jonah, who is like hilariously misquoting all of these Psalms and thinking he's a good guy when he's really not. And then there's the Israelite, who is probably fearing another occupation from Rome or whatever, who is going to read this and see a prayer that's actually very relevant to them, and be given hope that the belly of the beast that they are in, whatever empire is currently crushing them, that actually in places that seem dark and chaotic and dragon-like, there is hope for rebirth and being made new. Which is what we'll get into when we actually get into Jonah 2. So now we've officially finished Jonah 1, and we can move to the second chapter next time. So let's pray